I'm Mark Hennick. This is So-Called Normal. Hey folks, welcome to So-Called Normal. I'm Mark Hennick. Today on the show we have Seamus O'Regan, or as you hear in our interview, Seamus O'Regan, I believe I said to him, probably very offensively, but he was very accommodating of me. Seamus and I have known each other for quite a while now, actually, and he, although it's an election season now, of course, a federal election season in Canada, before the election was called, he was Minister O'Regan. He was Minister of Indigenous Services. Prior to that, he was the Minister of Veterans Affairs. Prior to that, he spent 10 years as a co-host of Canada's longest, oldest morning show, Canada AM, which I didn't appear on until after he left, unfortunately. I wish we had been able to work together a little bit on Canada AM on the few times that I was on. But he was a morning institution in Canada for more than a decade. So we chat a bit about that. We chat about his life in politics, but also his brave decision to open up about his alcoholism and the support that he received from his workplace, which was, his boss was Prime Minister Trudeau and his colleagues in Parliament. So we spend a bit of time talking about that. We chatted in his office on Parliament Hill before the election was called, but thought it would be a good chance to share it with you now. So here's my conversation on So-Called Normal with Seamus O'Regan.
I'm a member of Parliament now, and I'm also a cabinet minister, the Minister for Indigenous Services. Before that, I was the Minister of Veterans Affairs. And before all of that, I was a journalist for 17 years.
And you did Canada AM. I don't know if we ever met if you were still on it.
I think you came on after I left.
Yeah, I think so.
So I was on Canada AM for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And a great 10 years. And it was actually during that time that we realized, myself and Bev and Jeff and Marcy, the four hosts, and our producers realized that there wasn't a lot of talk about mental health on air. Mm-hmm. And one of the nice things about having a 3-hour show every morning is that you've got this great expanse of time. You still do 3.5 minute interviews, but you at least if you try and eke out some time for something important, you can. And I think it's quite fortuitous that two of those issues that were actually three of them, which is really interesting, were mental health, Indigenous issues, and veterans issues.
Yeah.
And
you've been actively involved in
all
three
three.
of those.
Yeah. But I won't take credit for that. I mean, collectively, we all felt that those three issues were things that needed to be talked about more. Mm-hmm. And we advocated to make sure that we were covering those stories as well as we could. Mm. So because of that, Bell then asked me to be a Bell Let's Talk ambassador, and I was, I think, for about 4 years. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that I came to terms with my addiction, and I have been, as a result of that, suffering from anxiety and depression. While after I had become this billboard poster guy across the country, which is something.
You hear this all the time from people who are out there doing public work and, speaking about their story. I dealt with this too. I talked to Michael Landsberg about this, so many others, that people expect that
Michael's the pioneer.
And so many people, Claire Hughes as well has talked about this. Yeah. People expect you to have all your shit together once you're out there talking about recovery and mental health and all this stuff, but it doesn't really seem to happen that way.
No, I was sick and doing it.
Right.
Complete denial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a different spin on it. Yeah. And Romeo Dallaire, I think, probably brought two of those three issues that I talked about together, quite pointedly for us, and would say some very brave things on air with us that sometimes he didn't say elsewhere that really made a mark on us. Yeah, I think, on that show.
Now, do you think this happened long after you left, but Canada AM, of course, is no longer on the air after, I think, 40 years.
43.
43 years, wow. That's partly the appetite of the audience, I think, for shorter, smaller, more entertainment-based journalism, I guess, or morning television. Do you think is that the case, and do you think it's impacted how they tell stories?
I think. Well, here we are, on a podcast.
Right.
I think that says something.
Yeah.
I think the media industry is so in flux at the moment, and the news media industry is so in flux at the moment. Just reading an article last night in Wired magazine on Facebook and how it's affected the news media. It's very complicated, and it's very much in flux. And so when a show that had been on the air for 43 years suddenly ends on a couple of days' notice, that's very telling. And it's tough. How a lot of these traditional news organizations are just having a tough time making money.
Yeah.
And you need to make money to sustain yourself.
Right. And there still seems to be, though, an appetite for what is done. I mean, yes, on the one hand, Canada AM goes off the air after 43 years, yet there's still an appetite for long-form storytelling and podcasts just like this. Podcasts are exploding now.
Yeah, exactly. So people seek it out in different places. Right. I think maybe what's missing right now anyway is kind of the more singular experiences, everybody gathering around, and maybe I'm just a romantic for this sort of stuff, but everybody gathering around and I'm watching the 60 Minutes once a week, or watching this week has 7 days kind of thing. I mean,
Game of Thrones, if you're
now it's Game of Thrones. Yeah, exactly. But that's not that's not news. And in fact, I'm not on Twitter anymore because frankly, it was making me too anxious.
Yeah.
But I was thinking last night, that's one thing I miss about Twitter. It's just kind of is that a kind of as divisive as it can be, it does bring people together in a collective experience. Sure. And it just adds to the excitement of a shared experience.
Yeah. But you and maybe your background in your long background in media before you got into politics helps you with this, but
I don't know how much I got to tell you. It helps me, but anyway. No,
but just in terms of being a public figure, and with that comes, I think, a certain necessary training to let a lot of stuff roll off your back. That, you're going to trigger emotions, opinions in viewers. They're going to share those with you.
Yeah, I think, sure. I think I noticed that I joined Twitter 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago. It's changed a lot, though. Mm-hmm. And it was a very passive and I would say kind of exciting, interactive experience to have with your viewers initially. Right. I think, it's become tougher now. And it doesn't necessarily have to be because you're a public figure. Right. I think that you could be anybody, and if 50 people in your high school decide that they want to pile on you, that feels horrific. Yeah, sure. Because it's incessant now, and you can't hide from it. Right. If you're bullied at school, when I was a kid, I always knew that you could go home at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and it would go away, and tempers would go, and maybe you wouldn't be in vogue the next day. Right. For everybody. But now that's not the case, and everybody can get on without any consequence.
Yeah, and it's always on.
It's always on.
Yeah.
So it's in that sense it's different.
Yeah. So how did you then take the step? Because it's hard to do, to either completely cut that off, or you said, are you on Twitter at all anymore?
No. I mean, I'll write my stuff and I'll put it out. So so it's my voice. I think that's really important. It's just I'm not as exposed anymore to it. Yeah. So it's not on my devices. Yeah. And I would say it's probably not coincidental that I've had some incredibly productive months since I've been off it.
Yeah, sure.
And I just feel better. So you just, I think for each person, you kind of reach that point where you're like, I'm not getting as much out of this as it's taking from me.
That's an interesting.
And if you reach that point, then why you want it, you got to ask yourself.
So not to.
But Instagram's great.
Well, I was going to say not to torture this segue too much, but that sounds an awful lot like the moment of change in addiction as well. When did you realize, or did you realize that it got to a point where it's not serving you?
When your family tells you, when your friends tell you, which they did with me in a kind of a coordinated effort. Right. That my brother and some close friends had pulled together, and that's when you know. Yeah. If people who you love and trust say, "Okay, you've got a problem. We need to fix it."
Yeah. And did you listen to them? Did you accept them?
I did. Yeah. Yeah, quite readily, and was immediately relieved. I think there are different levels of it for everybody, and I think that everybody handles these things differently. Yeah. with me, that's how it happened. And I think, to the point of something you were discussing earlier, I think when it comes to mental health too, I think that everybody has to realize that there are different levels. Mm. And I think the most important thing, and I always say this, and I was saying it when I really needed to hear these words myself and absorb them, but I believed it then, and I believe it even obviously more strongly now, is that it doesn't have to be catastrophic.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the end of the world. It doesn't have to be so big.
Right.
You still go to a doctor when you're not well. You don't go to a doctor because you have stage 4 cancer every time. You go to the doctor for preventative treatment mm-hmm. or for ailments that run the gamut in between. Mm-hmm. And I could have been much worse if I had been allowed to keep going.
Yeah.
And I would have, without a doubt, ruined, a very nascent political career.
Yeah.
So
when you came out,
lucky.
Speaking of your political career, your family, when you came out, you admitted that you had a problem and you sought help. What was the response like to the people around you, both that knew you and that had voted for you?
Wow, really positive.
Yeah.
We are so lucky to live in the times that we live in. For me, for 2 particular reasons. As a gay married man, there's never been a better time to be alive and to be happy. And it'll only get better, it seems to me. And as somebody in public life with who suffered from mental illness and sought help and did it publicly, there's never been a better time.
Which was harder, coming out as gay or coming out as an alcoholic?
Man, oh man. Don't let me choose between my children. I mean, I covered both so much. Oh God, that's a tough one. But I think one thing that I learned in therapy, and I don't think this is unusual, but in my time in rehab, is that one was definitely tied to the other.
Right.
I came out late. It was stressful. I made it look like it was very easy. And it wasn't, as it turned out. And I didn't really appreciate how hard a time I had with it. And
were you already in public life by then? In journalism?
Yeah. And I don't, anyway, I struggle with it. I realize now how much I struggle with it. And then drinking a lot was something that helped me cope.
Yeah.
And that mine is not a terribly unusual story.
No. I mean, there's almost always a reason why people engage in the coping behaviors that they do. And you had mentioned you were experiencing depression and anxiety anyway.
Certainly as a result of, I think more as a result of the drinking, to be honest. I think that's the case. It is hard to know. And this is something that, I think still causes people to, who study these things to stay up late at night. Yeah. And it's something that was taught to me. In that vicious cycle, it's hard to know where one begins and one ends.
Right.
Whether, what starts the depression and the anxiety. But there's no question that it creates a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And one begets the other. And that I know for sure. Yeah. And I think at some point it doesn't really matter, whether it is the chicken or whether it is the egg.
Right.
You're in the middle of the swirl and you got to know to stop it.
Yeah. So now we tell people, have been telling people for the last, I think it's been 8 years of Bell Let's Talk, 7 or 8 years. It's been a while anyway. Mm-hmm. But one of the core messages in the mental health movement, the advocacy world, is to tell people to reach out for help.
Yeah.
And that's all well and good, assuming a few things. You have somebody to reach back. Yeah. And you actually get the help that you reach out for. I mean, you did.
I think, it was not easy though. Right. We chose, in terms of where I would go to rehab, when you make that decision, it is an extraordinary leap. And you have to act quickly. Once I did it, I left here, literally my office here in the neighboring building with the suit I had in a toiletry bag. Wow. And I just went, let's go. Yeah. And my old boss, Brian Tobin, and his wife and my husband, we had dinner. We looked at a place online that was in Toronto, and we thought that's the place to go to. And I went, and it wasn't. But I didn't want to leave it
Right.
because I didn't want to give up on it, and I didn't want to give up on the process.
How did you know that it wasn't the right place and that it wasn't you reacting?
I don't want to betray anybody's privacy, to be honest with you, because of other people who were there. It's just, it was definitely not for me.
Right.
And I knew that I would not get well there.
Right.
And so then you're conflicted because you don't want anybody to think that you're giving up on the process.
Right. Yeah.
So then we found another place online. Like now we were just Googling places.
That's
like,
that's what everybody does.
Yeah.
I think.
And then I after 2 nights at this place, I had my sister pick me up, and then her husband and I went out and we went to another place near Toronto. And there was no, they couldn't wait to take my credit card, but I looked around with, this is not it. I mean, I don't have anything in common. And it's just different diseases. It's different things. I knew it. And I said to my brother-in-law, you tell me. And he's like, no, you got to get out of here. And then we found the place. And it had been recommended to me by, friends of mine who were doctors. And I just drove out there. Right. And we drove about 6 hours that night. And I just showed up. Not knowing if I could get in. I did an application on the phone on the way. And they said, well, we don't have any openings. And I said, well, I'm just going to show up. And so I know the intensity of that. Yeah. And we have, as a society, I mean, this is something I really carry with me because I know it. When you work up that courage to make that leap, you got to be ready to accept people.
Right.
And that is really tough. I mean, we have as a society really have to decide that those investments are worth it, so that when people make those decisions, that the help is there for them right there. Yeah. I had family driving me around. I had people I'm very, very lucky. Yeah. And I, got into a place, and that in itself was just luck. Yeah. So what would I have done if I hadn't gone into that place? I don't know. I thought about it. I probably would have gone back to my sister's and hunkered down and waited. Yeah. But I'm really fortunate that I did. And then I was, almost 5 weeks in there. Yeah. And I felt like $1 million since.
What was that first night like that you were in there for the long haul?
Scary, I think. Relieved, but still scary, I guess, in the sense that, I had to detox for a night. Right. And
how long had you gone prior to that? Like, or were you drinking every day? Or was
yeah.
Yeah.
So but at that point, I hadn't in a couple of days.
Right.
And anyway, I was fine. I mean, I didn't have any issue with it. And I immediately saw the guy who ran the facility and who founded it. And he had founded it based on his own addictions issues when he was about my age. And he's just a brilliant, brilliant guy who I still keep in touch with. And he just said, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. I think he could sense how scared he was. And I think he just knew how badly I wanted it. And I mean, again, and there's just varying grades of everything. And that he just looked at me, and you're going to be fine. And it was just like, oh, okay.
I actually myself, in my own experience too, find that to be one of the most inspiring reassurances that you can get, right? Because when you don't feel fine, you don't think anything's ever going to get better. Right?
No, and it's nice when it's kind of a third body and somebody with qualifications. That matters. Yeah. And when he just looks at you and says, you're going to be fine. And that's something. I always say, I'll share with people this anecdote too. And I've said it a few times, but it's really important. And I think for me, it was a huge turning point. When my sister came and picked me up from the first place I went to, she said, my God, we've got to get you some clothes, some clothes for rehab. We don't know what. So we went to Winners because we just love Winners. So we went to Winners. I needed some leisure wear, like some gym outfits, something comfortable. Yeah. And because I had no clothes except for,
your suit and tie, your MP pin.
Yeah, my MP pin. No joke. That's true. Yeah, my MP pin. Yeah. So, how do you dress? So anyway, we went to Winners, and as you get up to the cash, there's all these candies and stuff like that. And I grabbed this big bag of organic candy. Excuse me. And my sister's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm buying candy." And she said, "But you don't like candy." And I went, I know. And there was a sign. She said, put it back. And I went, no. which we kind of laughed at, but I bought the candy. And when I was admitted to this place the next day, or later that day, actually, it's a long day. He said to me, the admitting doctor said, anything strange happened to you? And I said, no. And I said, actually, yeah, I bought candy. And there was silence, and he went, well, your brain actually bought the candy. And I said, what do you mean? He said, your brain accepted that it's not going to get any sugars that it would normally get from alcohol. So it bought the candy. And I said, I surrender. If my brain has been acting independently of me and my mind for physiological reasons, because it needs sugars, and has been, one of the reasons that I've been driven to drink, then I surrender, because I can't compete with that. It's when you do that, that to me was a real turning point, because I surrendered myself totally and realized I was not in control of my life.
Right.
And I had to stop kidding myself. And this was something physiological, it was something physical. And I had to let go and allow professionals to take over. And that was a turning point.
I think, without talking about any particular programs, I think it's fairly widely known that that's often the first step, is to surrender yourself over. Why do you think that? I don't know if you participate in a 12-step or anything, but why do you think that is so important for people? What are they clinging to?
I don't know. For people, I don't know, for a type A type like me, that I can get through anything.
Right.
That I can outthink it, that I can overcome it. And there's a tremendous humility that comes with, no, you cannot.
Right.
And, we all think that we have some semblance of control. The idea that your brain is going out shopping independently of you, driving to places, that's something. If you really let that sink in, that is quite something.
So Irish and Newfoundlander, were you raised Catholic?
Oh God.
Yeah.
Seamus O'Regan, what do you think?
No, I was because this idea that you're not in control, that and especially grew up in Cape Breton as well, Irish Catholic.
Yeah.
Life is hard.
Life's hard, yeah.
You figure it out, but you can do something with that too. And it sounds
and this is in keeping with that, confronting the fact that some things are hard and hard things are hard. And I will work hard then to overcome it.
Yeah.
And the other thing I had to learn to do was to be alone again, and not to be alone with my own devices and left to my own devices, and to be alone to do things other than, at what I have been doing alone for the years previous, which was drink.
And your whole career has been about people paying attention to you.
Yeah.
Right?
And I went through, so what they taught me was, there's a few things. I mean, genetics, genetically, my people are prone to drink. Culturally, my people are prone to drink. So the third thing was a stressor. And the stressor for me was unemployment. I had left media. I was not working. And getting back to your point about how the media game had changed a lot, the industry had changed, the profession had changed, journalism had changed, and it was tough to get work.
Yeah.
And I had a mortgage. I had a husband who's, his job are kind of precarious, and we suddenly found ourselves I was extremely stressed, and suddenly the drinking became something I did on my own to get through the day, to cope. And that's, this is all utterly and totally normal. This is what happens when people are confronted with what they feel to be overbearing stress.
Yeah.
And that was for me. I did not react well to unemployment, and I did not react well to being a self-contractor, or being self-employed, being in charge of running my life. Right. I realized that my whole life I had been in university institutions or in a structured job environment. Right. I mean, Canada Am was an extremely structured, crazy but structured life. that began at 4 a.m. and ended late at night. And everything was worked out and people looked after things.
You're told what to say, where to look, where to stand.
Yeah. You know, I mean, your freest moments were in front of the camera, ironically, and the rest of it was very structured. Yeah. And without that structure, it was, I was lost.
Yeah.
I was lost.
So then you go in for treatment, and it seems to have, well, you said it's worked wonders for you. What's the journey been like after that? That's the part that we almost never hear about, right? You get the help, but then what happens after?
I got the work.
You got the work. That helped too. Hey,
which is the best thing.
What a funny solution to unemployment-related stress. Employment, right?
Yes. So, you know, I got the job. I won the election, but the sickness stayed.
Yeah.
My brain had changed, and I even in victory was sick.
Right.
But that's when it had to end, because I had everything now. Like I had it.
Yeah.
You know, I had what I wanted, and you know, so since then it's been the work. I'm just so grateful for meaningful work.
So how do you find that your especially your experience.
Speaking of which, I got to vote in 2.
So I'm going to let you go, but I don't want to let you go without talking a little bit about what you're currently doing for Indigenous Services. Do you think that your experience has made you better at the job that you're currently doing?
I think it makes you more empathetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Bob Ray, when he was on the show, he said the same thing too, that it helps you to build a connection with people that maybe you wouldn't have had before.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And even in everyday life. I mean, you know, Steve and I go out shopping. He can tell by the way that somebody approaches me what they want to talk about. So some people just say, I watched you on TV and I love, or, you know, you're doing this, or yeah, I don't like what you're doing. But when somebody wants to talk to you about what they're going through, or their children are going through, their parents are going through, or a friend is going through, or what they're going through, he knows, and he just knows to kind of walk away.
Right.
And allow us a few minutes. Yeah. And I think that's a gift.
Yeah,
it's a gift if people feel that they can come up to me, and it's deeply moving to me.
To be invited into their lives.
To be invited into that is deeply, deeply moving.
So when one of those people comes up to you, and we'll end it here so you can go vote, but when one of those people comes up to you and they think that something might be wrong, or if somebody reaches out to you and tells you that they think they have a problem, what would you say to them?
Get help. Fight for that help. And that's not easy to say, because we still have so much work to do on building those resources. I mean, but the 2 portfolios that one that I hold and one that I held, Veterans Affairs and now Indigenous Services, we are still building up those capacities. But we all need those capacities, you know? The worst thing that we can do is get people to talk bravely and to bring them out into the light and then leave them there. That is the worst thing we can do. You know, I spoke to a woman once who had she won notoriety as a mental health champion of mental health. She couldn't get work because then people Googled her name.
Right.
And they didn't want to hire her because she was open about that is the worst. This only works if we're there for people. So, I mean, I'm proud of the fact that we're trying to build up that capacity federally. And within the 2 departments that I dealt with, you know, that we've been trying to build up that capacity, but we have a long way to go. And you can't, when people work up the courage to ask for help, make sure that help is there for them. Yeah. You know, that's the struggle. That's the struggle for us right now. That's the huge challenge. That's the big next chapter that we're all working on. In
a liberal democracy like Canada, you would expect that that's the least we can do for people. Right?
Absolutely. Your words and mine. Yeah.
Well, Seamus O'Regan.
Nice.
Thank you. I was practicing.
That's a tingle in my head. Well done, sir.
Thank you so much for your time today, and I'll let you go vote.
Go vote.
All right. Thanks, Seamus.
Good to talk to you.
That's it. That's my conversation with Seamus O'Regan. He was the Minister of Indigenous Services before the election was called, and now he's campaigning, back on the campaign trail. So go check him out on social media. I know he said that he's not doing as much of the social media thing anymore, but really look into his story as well, and some of the things that he's said about mental health and about his battle with addiction, with alcoholism, I think is really inspiring for anybody who's anywhere on that recovery journey themselves. So I'm so grateful to Seamus for talking to me on the podcast. If you want to hear more conversations, we also talked to Bob Ray a while back ago, and lots of other people. So go over to Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the show, scroll down to the bottom, leave us a star rating. Look through some of the others. Rosie O'Donnell's on there. We got Glenn Close. We had all kinds of other people. I mean, there's almost 40 at this point episodes on there, and lots more to come. New episodes every single Monday. So subscribe so you can tune in. You can also find out which episodes are coming up and who's going to be on them by following me on social media. I'm at Mark Hennick. That's at MarkHenick on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, everywhere else. So go and follow me on social media, and you can learn more about the show there. The show's everywhere too. If you don't have Apple Podcast, you can get it on Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play Store, Google Podcast, whatever it's called. You can get it everywhere else. So thanks for your support for the show. Thank you to Seamus O'Regan for coming on and chatting. This has been So-Called Normal, and I'm Mark Hennick.